Relax, okay? DC Comics is one of the biggest and most influential publishers in the history of comic books, having created some of the most iconic and recognized characters in pop culture, like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, Green Lantern, and many others. Besides comics, DC expanded its universe to other media such as movies, television, video games, animations, becoming a powerhouse in the entertainment market. Their stories and characters have fans all over the world and inspire generations of artists and creators. DC has also been pioneering and representing diverse characters such as women, people of color, LGBT+, in addition to addressing important issues like social justice, politics, philosophy, and ethics. In summary, DC's importance in the comics universe and entertainment in general lies in the creation of a vast and iconic universe of characters and stories that captivated and inspired generations of fans all over the world. Stay here until the end of the video because today every DC and pop culture fan will freak out. So, without further ado, roll the intro there, editor. Speaking of your video, tell me 3 characters that you like the most from DC Comics, okay? 3, huh? Don't send me a list, just tell me 3. So, here we go. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to divide this video into a few parts, you know, for the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, the golden age, the silver age, and so on. I'm going to divide it up neatly right here so it's well organized, okay? So without further ado, let's get started. Part 1, the origins of DC Comics. DC Comics has its roots in the 1930s when the comic book market was starting to gain traction in the United States. At that time, publishing comic books was a relatively new activity and there weren't many companies dedicated to the field. It was in this context that Detective Comics was created in 1934 as a publisher of mystery and detective comic books. The magazine quickly became a success, and in 1937 the company decided to launch a magazine dedicated entirely to the most prominent character on its pages. Who is it? It's Batman. The following year, 1938, DC Comics, which stands for Detective Comics, a redundancy since it's comics, eh? A redundancy that ended up sticking around. They released Superman into his own comic, and the debut of the character Superman was a landmark in the history of comics and entertainment in general, introducing for the first time a hero with superhuman abilities. Because Batman is a very able, very prepared human being, but he does not have superpowers, just money and preparation. So for the first time, Superman with superhuman abilities and a captivating personality. With the success of Superman and Batman, DC Comics expanding their character universe, introducing other heroes like Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern. These characters became popular among readers and helped popularize the superhero concept, which until then was little explored. Moreover, DC Comics was also responsible for popularizing the superhero comics genre, which eventually became one of the biggest and most profitable entertainment industries worldwide. The creation of iconic characters like Superman and Batman, as well as the expansion of the DC universe with other iconic heroes and villains, helped establish the company's enduring legacy in the comics world and pop culture, video games, TV series, later in the cinema. Part 2, the Golden Age of Comics. The Golden Age of Comics was a period of great popularity and innovation in the comic book market that extended from the mid-1930 AS to the late 1940s. During this period, DC Comics was one of the most successful and influential publishers in the market. One of the defining features of the Golden Age was the popularization of superheroes, primarily driven by the success of Superman and Batman, the dynamic duo. DC Comics expanded its universe of characters by introducing other heroes like Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern. Moreover, the publisher also presented a series of iconic villains such as the Joker, the Penguin, and Lex Luthor, who are still popular today, right? The popularity of superhero comics was also reflected in other media like radio and cinema. For instance, did you know that Superman got his own radio series in 1940, which became a huge success? Batman starred in several low-budget films in the 1940s. Another remarkable feature of the Golden Age was the diversity of genres in comics. In addition to superheroes, comic books also featured science fiction, fantasy, romance, westerns, and war stories. This variety helped to expand the readership and consolidate the comic book market as a popular form of entertainment. However, the Golden Age was also marked by controversy and debate over the content of comic books. In the mid-1940s, some groups began criticizing comics for allegedly encouraging violence and juvenile delinquency. This culminated in a series of congressional hearings in the United States in 1954, known as the Un-American Activities Committee. These hearings led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority, a code of ethics that imposed a number of restrictions on the contents of comics. You know something else that should be restricted here, or unrestricted? Our subscription to the channel you like, right? It takes a long time to do this kind of research, to bring this information. So help the channel out here, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification, and obviously send in your comments. Despite these controversies, the Golden Age of comics has left a lasting legacy in pop culture. Many of the characters created during this era have become pop culture icons and continue to inspire new generations of readers and fans. Part 3, the Silver Age in comics. The Silver Age in comics was a period of innovation and renewal in the comic book market that stretched from the mid-1950s to the early 1970s. During this time, DC Comics was one of the most active and creative publishers in the business. One of the key features of the Silver Age was the revival of superhero comics, which had lost some of their popularity after the comic book controversy in the 1950s. DC Comics revamped its classic characters, introducing new comic book versions. DC Comics revamped its classic characters, presenting new versions of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and others. These new versions had more complex and conflicted personalities than their Golden Age counterparts, reflecting the cultural and social changes of the time. In addition, DC Comics also introduced a number of new Silver Age characters, such as new versions of the Flash, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. These characters had different powers and abilities than the classic heroes and reflected a greater diversity in superhero comics. Another striking feature of the Silver Age was the introduction of more complex and mature stories into comics. DC Comics launched Showcase in 1956, which featured stories of lesser-known characters and allowed new talent to experiment with new ideas, a laboratory of new heroes. For example, this magazine was the first to introduce the Flash and Green Lantern to the public. Moreover, DC Comics also launched a series of team-up superhero titles like the Justice League and Justice Society. These teams featured a range of characters with different abilities and personalities, allowing for more complex and dynamic stories, and the combining of each character's powers and abilities. The Silver Age was also marked by technical innovations in comics. The introduction of more advanced coloring techniques and the use of more dynamic page layouts helped make the comics more visually interesting and appealing. In summary, the Silver Age of comics was a period of great creativity and innovation in the comic book industry. DC Comics played a key role in this era, introducing new characters, new, more complex and mature stories, as well as technical innovations that helped boost the popularity of comics globally. Part 4, the DC of the 70s and 80s. In the 70s and 80s, DC Comics underwent several transformations, experimenting with new characters, new formats, new approaches. In the 70s, DC Comics continued to publish stories of its classic characters, obviously Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. However, it also created new characters like the Urban Watcher, the Question, created by Steve Ditko in 1967, and the Golden Age superhero team, the Justice Society of America, which returned in a new monthly series in 1976. Moreover, the publisher ventured into other genres like horror, science fiction, like series like The House of Mysteries and The Weird War Tales. The rivalry between DC Comics and Marvel Comics intensified in the 70s when Marvel became the most popular publisher in the United States thanks to characters like Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. To compete with Marvel, DC Comics created stories that were more realistic and relevant to the time. Neil Adams and Danny O'Neill's Batman, for example, tackled topics like police corruption and drug use. One of the most notable DC Comics series in the 70s was the Swamp Thing saga, created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson in 1971. The story followed scientist Alec Holland, who was transformed into a mutant creature after an accident in a swamp. The series was praised for its mature approach and horror atmosphere, and it continued to be published successfully. To be published with different writers and artists up until the 90s. In the 80s, DC Comics faced a variety of challenges, including a decrease in the popularity of comics and a shift in the market due to competition from video games and television. However, the publisher managed to reinvent itself yet again with the publication of major events like the Saga of Eternal Darkness and the Death of Superman. In addition, DC Comics launched new series like Watchmen and Batman, The Dark Knight, and also Sandman, which have become iconic in the comic book world to this day. The decade of the 80s was also marked by one of the most important events in the history of DC Comics, the publication of the Crisis on Infinite Earth series, written by Marv Wolfman and drawn by George Perez. If you want me to bring a video only about the Crisis on Infinite Earths, including the original one and now that had a TV series, and now there are rumors that's going to. Scroll a little further down on the DCU, leave your comments below. Continuing. The story redefined the entire DC Comics universe, eliminating parallel lands and creating one timeline for its characters. This allowed the characters to be modernized and have more cohesive stories because of the confusion of timelines. In short, in the 70s and 80s, DC Comics faced many challenges and reinvented itself several times, creating new characters, series, and important events that influenced an entire generation. Part 5, DC in the 90s and 2000s. In the 90s and 2000s, DC Comics underwent several significant changes, from reinventing classic characters to creating new heroes and stories. In the 90s, DC Comics continued to publish stories of its classic characters, but it also expanded its universe with new superhero characters and teams. One of the most popular series of the decade was Batman, Fall of the Bat, which redefined Batman's character with the introduction of villain Bane and the breaking of Bruce Wayne's spine, as we saw in Christian Bale's film. Aside from that, the publisher launched new titles such as Superman, The Death of Clark Kent, and 0 Hour, redefining DC's universe once again. In the 2000s, DC Comics continued to expand its universe with an emphasis on reimagining and reinventing classic characters. One of the most popular series of the decade was Birds of Prey, gathering Batgirl, Black Canary, and Oracle into a team of female superheroes. The publisher also launched the new 52 series, redefining the entire DC universe with new origins and stories for its characters. In 2005, DC Comics published the Infinite Crisis series, which was a sequel to the Crisis on Infinite Earths in the 80s. The story brought back characters from other parallel Earths and set up a new timeline for the DC universe. Also, Infinite Crisis had big consequences for the DC universe, including the deaths of several characters, the reinvention of others, and the introduction of new heroes and villains. In the 2000s, DC Comics also had a big impact on the film and television industry. The TV series Smallville, it was a huge success, following the life of Clark Kent before he became Superman. Also, the Batman movie trilogy, directed by Christopher Nolan, starting with Batman Begins in 2005, was critically and publicly successful. DC Comics also released several successful animated shows, including Justice League and Batman, the animated series. In recent years, DC Comics has continued to expand its universe with new characters, new events, and stories. The publisher launched the DC Rebirth series in 2016, which brought back many classic characters and set a new direction for the DC universe. DC Comics has also been focusing on more diverse and inclusive stories, presenting characters from various backgrounds and experiences. In short, in the 90s and the 2000s, DC Comics continued to reinvent itself. Comment below your 3 favorite DC heroes, and if you like this style of video telling the whole story, and if you want a video like the Marvel story. See you in the next video. See you later.